The chieftain stepped forward, face unreadable, his breath clouding. His men looked to him for verdict. She had endured far longer than any woman before her, nearly 20 minutes by some accounts, when most collapsed within 5. Too long. Her silence had become accusation. Her body had become unspoken rebellion. And that's when the whispers began, quiet and dangerous. She did not yield. She is blessed. She did not lie. For one flickering moment, the ritual cracked. The trial meant to prove guilt began proving something else, that pain could expose not sin but power. The chieftain couldn't allow it. He turned to the crowd, raised his voice above winter wind, howling through wall gaps. The rope breaks only when truth breaks with it. And with that pronouncement, the crowd's fear shifted, twisting back into obedience. The ritual had nearly unraveled, but his words stitched it together again. That's the genius of systemic cruelty. It doesn't need to win, it only needs to survive one more day. The rope trial continued for generations after Sigrid, sometimes testing fidelity, a husband accusing his wife of loving another during long winter separations, sometimes testing betrayal, a servant accused of withholding secrets. Always public, always bound in ritual language to make winter savagery sound sacred. A Christian monk, writing in 1067, recorded an account of northern people who pull truth from the hair of women. He called it barbaric. But what he missed was that this wasn't barbarism. It was bureaucracy masked in faith. The cruelty was structured, standardized. It had rules, witnesses, hierarchies, record keepers. The rope trial wasn't civilization's collapse. It was civilization's tool. Over time, something strange happened. The victims' names began vanishing from records, replaced by euphemisms: the tested, the enduring, the unbroken. These weren't mere titles. They were historical erasers, concealments designed to make suffering faceless and digestible. But archaeology remembers what chronicles refuse. In 2017, at a dig site near Ribe, Denmark, researchers uncovered a pit lined with fractured wooden beams, 2 parallel posts with rope grooves worn deep into their surfaces from repeated use spanning decades. The hemp fibers found there were analyzed human blood residue, female DNA, traces of hair oil mixed with iron particles and sea salt. The remnants of endurance fossilized. Carbon dating placed the site's active use between 971,020 AD peak, Viking Age peak rope trial era, and there, in that silent evidence, history confessed. What the sagas called truth games were purification acts, meant to cleanse not the accused, but the collective conscience of witnesses. Every pull of the rope let the crowd discharge their hidden fears. Every collapse reaffirmed their illusion of purity. It wasn't the woman being tested, it was the society watching her, testing whether it could still believe its own lies. But sometimes something unexpected happened. A rope snapped too early, a woman stood too long, a husband cried out for mercy. In those rare moments when pain refused to perform its expected role, the whole system trembled. Because the rope trial depended on predictability, the script of guilt followed by collapse. When that script broke, so did the illusion of control. It's said that after Sigrid's trial in that December of 982, the longhouse stood empty for a year. No new rituals were held there. Livestock refused to enter the threshold. The beams, witnesses claimed, smelled forever of blood and brine, no matter how many times they scrubbed them with snow and ash. The chieftain moved his seat to another village. The hall was left to rot. Some claimed you could still hear ropes creaking on cold winter nights, though the beams had long fallen. But maybe that sound wasn't the past echoing. Maybe it was something else, the rope reminding us that the line between justice and cruelty has always been this thin, this frayed, this ready to snap. And as that ancient hall decayed into frozen earth, the smell of fear didn't fade. It simply moved from ritual to law, from rope to rhetoric, from one age to the next. Because systems don't die when their instruments break, they reinvent themselves. The rope trial, that winter game that ripped women apart, never truly ended. It just changed its ropes. Time doesn't bury cruelty. Cruelty adapts. The rope trial's hemp may have rotted, but its logic still breathes. That same smell lingers not in timber now, but in sterile rooms and offices and systems that still demand women prove their pain to be believed. Because what was the rope trial really, if not the birth of an idea that suffering itself could testify? That truth must be extracted, not spoken. That silence means guilt. Sigrid's hall collapsed, but her world endures. We've traded ropes for rhetoric, trials for hearings, but the choreography of control remains identical. A woman stands accused of betrayal, of disobedience, of being too much or not enough, and the crowd gathers to measure her endurance. Will she break? Will she cry? How much pain before she's believed? We like to think we're past such barbarism. But look closer. Every system built on fear still smells faintly of that same damp winter hall. The rope trial was never just Viking, it was human, a reflection of the deep primal impulse to make pain into proof. In medieval Europe, accused witches were bound and submerged in frozen rivers, the water deciding innocence. In 17th century Scandinavia, they called it the cold ordeal. In Victorian asylums, hysteria testing. Today, it wears new names: interrogation, defamation, social judgment, but the structure hasn't changed. The rope is now invisible, woven into expectations, reputations, algorithms, but it still pulls. And the worst part, we still watch. Just like that crowd in the winter longhouse, humanity gathers around each modern trial of pain, desperate for spectacle. The medium shifts the village square, replaced by the screen, but the ritual remains the same. The crowd doesn't seek truth, it seeks affirmation. It wants to see the accused prove herself worthy of empathy. It wants endurance, not innocence. That's the final cruelty we inherited, the rope's logic, without ever feeling the burn of its frozen fibers. The smell of fear, the same one that clung to Viking halls during December trials, now hides in subtler places. In whispered apologies. In quiet resignation of those who know that truth, no matter how enduring, will not save them. And yet, there's something else in that smell too. Something older than fear: resistance. The faint trace of survival that refuses to vanish even when every rope has been pulled tight. Because Sigrid did not vanish. Her story survived, not in sagas, not carved in stone, but in the pulse that carries every act of defiance since then. Each time someone refuses to collapse under the pull of expectation, the rope snaps again, quietly, invisibly, echoing her endurance through centuries. The rope trial wasn't just a test of pain. It was the blueprint of power. It showed how easily faith can be weaponized, how ritual can mask domination, how fear can be made sacred. That's why we tell her story, not to relive horror, but to recognize its echo. So, when you think of Vikings, don't imagine only warriors, sails, and songs. Imagine the silence between screams, the moment when the woman stood unbroken while frozen ropes strained against her. That was the real battle, the one not sung, not carved, but felt. And if you listen closely, in the hum of the world around you, in the tension of systems that still pull, you might hear it, the faint sound of rope, the ancient rhythm of control, the whisper of endurance. It's still there, waiting, watching. But here's the truth: they could never pull from her. Endurance does not prove guilt. It exposes cruelty. That is the legacy of the rope trial. Not divine justice, not strength, but revelation. Sigrid's story ends where ours begins, at the place where history stops excusing itself. Every cruelty has a pattern, and every pattern can be broken. So don't just witness history, break it. This has been the story of the rope trial, the Viking ritual that tested not truth but submission. Remember that winter hall in 982 AD? Remember Sigrid of the North Shore, who endured 20 minutes of frozen rope tearing at her wrists and hair? Remember the archaeological evidence from Ribe, Denmark, the rope grooves the female DNA, the blood that wouldn't wash away. Remember that systems of cruelty don't die, they adapt. If you want more historical reality that destroys comfortable myths about the past, subscribe to Flow of History. We're just getting started revealing what actually happened behind the legends.